Oman, officially the Sultanate of Oman, is an Arab country in the southeastern coast of the Arabian Peninsula, holding a strategically important position at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. The nation is bordered by the United Arab Emirates to the northwest, Saudi Arabia to the west, and Yemen to the southwest, and shares marine borders with Iran and Pakistan. The coast is formed by the Arabian Sea on the southeast and the Gulf of Oman on the northeast. The Mabda and Muzandam exclaves are surrounded by the UAE on their land borders, with the Strait of Hormuz and Gulf of Oman forming Muzandam's coastal boundaries. From the late 17th century, the Omani Sultanate was a powerful empire, vying with Portugal and Britain for influence in the Persian Gulf and Indian Ocean. At its peak in the 19th century, Omani influence or control extended across the Strait of Hormuz to modern-day Iran and Pakistan, and as far south as Zanzibar. As its power declined in the 20th century, the Sultanate came under the influence of the United Kingdom. Historically, Muscat was the principal trading port of the Persian Gulf region. Muscat was also among the most important trading ports of the Indian Ocean. Oman's official religion is Islam. Oman is an absolute monarchy. The Sultan Qaboos bin Said Al Said has been the hereditary leader of the country since 1970. Sultan Qaboos is the longest-serving ruler in the Middle East. Oman's human rights record has been the subject of criticism. Unlike its resource-rich neighbors, Oman has modest oil reserves, ranking 25th globally. Nevertheless, in 2010 the UNDP ranked Oman as the most improved nation in the world in terms of development during the preceding 40 years. Oman is categorized as a high-income economy and ranks as the 59th most peaceful country in the world according to the Global Peace Index. History. Ancient history. At Ibit al-Awwal, in the Dhofar Governorate of Oman, a site was discovered in 2011 containing more than 100 surface scatters of stone tools belonging to a regionally specific African lithic industry, the late Nubian complex, known previously only from the northeastern Horn of Africa. Two optically stimulated luminescence age estimates place the Arabian-Nubian complex at 106,000 years old. This supports the proposition that early human populations moved from Africa into Arabia during the late Pleistocene. Dariza, located in the city of Ibra, is the oldest known human settlement in the area, dating back as many as 8,000 years to the Late Stone Age. Archaeological remains have been discovered here from the Stone Age and the Bronze Age. Findings have included stone implements, animal bones, shells and fire hearths, with the latter dating back to 7615 BC as the oldest signs of human settlement in the area. Other discoveries include hand-molded pottery bearing distinguishing pre-Bronze Age marks, heavy flint implements, pointed tools and scrapers. Sumerian tablets refer to a country called Magan or Makan, a name believed to refer to Oman's ancient copper mines. Mazun, another name used for the region, is derived from the word Muzn, which means heavy clouds which carry abundant water. Many such tribes settled in Oman, making a living by fishing, herding or stock breeding, and many present-day Omani families are able to trace their ancestral roots to other parts of Arabia. From the 6th century BC to the arrival of Islam in the 7th century AD, Oman was controlled or influenced by three Persian dynasties: the Achaemenids, Parthians and Sassanids. A few scholars believe that in the 6th century BC, the Achaemenids exerted a strong degree of control over the Omani peninsula, most likely ruling from a coastal center such as Sohar. Central Oman has its own indigenous so-called Late Iron Age cultural assemblage, the Samad al-Shan. By about 250 BC, the Parthian dynasty had brought the Persian Gulf under their control. They extended their influence as far as Oman, establishing garrisons there to exert control over the trade routes in the Persian Gulf. In the 3rd century AD, the Sassanids succeeded the Parthians and held the area until the rise of Islam. 4 centuries later, Omanis were among the first people to come in contact with and accept Islam. The conversion of the Omanis is usually ascribed to Amr ibn al-As, who was sent by the Prophet Muhammad during the expedition of Zayd ibn Haritha. Portuguese colonization. A decade after Vasco da Gama's successful voyage around the Cape of Good Hope and to India in 1497–98, the Portuguese arrived in Oman and occupied Muscat for a 143-year period, from 1507 to 1650. Their fortress still remains. In need of an outpost to protect their sea lanes, the Portuguese built up and fortified the city, where remnants of their colonial architectural style still exist. An Ottoman fleet captured Muscat in 1552, during the fight for control of the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean. The Ottoman Turks captured Muscat from the Portuguese again between 1581–88. Rebellious tribes eventually drove out the Portuguese, but were themselves pushed out about a century later, in 1741, by the leader of an Omani tribe, who began the current line of ruling sultans. Except for a brief Persian invasion in the late 1740s, Oman has been self-governing ever since. 18th and 19th centuries. In the 1690s, Saif bin Sultan, the Imam of Oman, pressed down the Swahili coast. A major obstacle to his progress was Fort Jesus, housing the garrison of a Portuguese settlement at Mombasa. After a 2-year siege, the fort fell to bin Sultan in 1698. Thereafter the Omanis easily ejected the Portuguese from Zanzibar and from all other coastal regions north of Mozambique. With the help of the Somali, the Persians invaded Oman in 1737. They were driven out in 1749 when the Al Saud dynasty came to power. It continues to rule Oman to this day. Zanzibar was a valuable property as the main slave market of the Swahili coast, and became an increasingly important part of the Omani Empire, a fact reflected by the decision of the 19th-century Sultan of Oman, Said ibn Sultan, to make it his main place of residence in 1837. Said built impressive palaces and gardens in Zanzibar. Rivalry between his two sons was resolved, with the help of forceful British diplomacy, when one of them, Majid, succeeded to Zanzibar and to the many regions claimed by the family on the Swahili coast. The other son, Thawani, inherited Muscat and Oman. Zanzibar influences in the Comoros archipelago in the Indian Ocean indirectly introduced Omani customs to the Comorian culture. These influences include clothing traditions and wedding ceremonies. In 1783, Oman's Syed Sultan, defeated ruler of Muscat, was granted sovereignty over Gwadar. This coastal city is located in the Makran region of what is now the far southwestern corner of Pakistan, near the present-day border of Iran, at the mouth of the Gulf of Oman. After regaining control of Muscat, this sovereignty was continued via an appointed Wali. The Hajar Mountains, of which the Jebel Akhdar is a part, separate the country into two distinct regions. The interior, known as Oman, and the coastal area dominated by the capital, Muscat. In 1913, control of the country split. The interior was ruled by Abadite imams and the coastal areas by the Sultan. Under the terms of the British-brokered Treaty of Sebes of 1920, the Sultan recognized the autonomy of the interior. The Sultan of Muscat would be responsible for the external affairs of Oman. Reign of Sultan Said. The rule of Sultan Said bin Taimur was characterized by a feudal and isolationist approach. Imam Ghalib al-Hinai was the elected Imam of the Imamate of Oman in May 1954. Relations between the Sultan of Muscat, Said bin Taimur, and Imam Ghalib al-Hinai were ruptured over a dispute concerning the right to grant oil concessions. a subsidiary of the Iraq Petroleum Company, was intensely interested in some promising geological formations near Farhud. Under the terms of the 1920 Treaty of Sebes, the Sultan claimed all dealings with the oil company as his prerogative. The Imam, on the other hand, claimed that since the oil was in his territory, anything dealing with it was an internal matter. In December 1955, Sultan Said bin Zubayr sent troops of the Muscat in Oman field force to occupy the main centers in Oman, including Nizwa, the capital of the Imamate of Oman, and Ibri. Imam Ghalib al-Hinai and his younger brother, Talib bin Ali al-Hinai, led the Imamate of Oman in the Jebel Akhdar war against Sultan Said bin Taimur's attack on his lands. In July 1957, the Sultan's forces were withdrawing, but they were repeatedly ambushed, sustaining heavy casualties. Sultan Said bin Taimur, however, with the intervention of infantry, armoured car detachments from the British Army and RAF aircraft, was able to suppress the rebellion. Talib's forces retreated to the inaccessible Jebel Akhdar. Colonel David Smiley, who had been seconded to organize the Sultan's armed forces, managed to isolate the mountain in autumn 1958 and found a route to the plateau from Wadi Bani Karu. On 27 January 1959, they occupied the mountain in a surprise operation. Ghalib, Talib and Suleiman managed to escape to Saudi Arabia, where the Imamate's cause was promoted until the 1970s. In 1955, the exclave coastal Makran Strip acceded to Pakistan and was made a district of its Balochistan province, while Gwadar was not included in Makran then. On 8 September 1958, Pakistan purchased the Gwadar enclave from Oman for $3 million. Gwadar then became a tehsil in the Makran district. Oil reserves were discovered in 1964 and extraction began in 1967. In the Dhofar Rebellion, which began in 1965, leftist forces were pitted against government troops. As the rebellion threatened to overthrow the Sultan's rule in Dhofar, Sultan Said bin Taimur was deposed in a bloodless coup by his son Qaboos bin Said, who expanded the Sultan of Oman's armed forces, modernized the state's administration and introduced social reforms. The uprising was finally put down in 1975 with the help of forces from Iran, Jordan, Pakistan and the British Royal Air Force and Special Air Service. Reign of Sultan Qaboos. After deposing his father in 1970, Sultan Qaboos opened up the country, embarked on economic reforms, and followed a policy of modernization marked by increased spending on health, education and welfare. In 1981, Oman became a founding member of the Six-Nation Gulf Cooperation Council. Political reforms were eventually introduced. Historically, voters had been chosen from among tribal leaders, intellectuals, and businessmen. In 1997, Sultan Qaboos decreed that women could vote for, and stand for election to, the Majlis al-Shura, the Consultative Assembly of Oman. 2 women were duly elected to the body. In 2002, voting rights were extended to all citizens over the age of 21, and the first elections to the Consultative Assembly under the new rules were held in 2003. In 2004, the Sultan appointed Oman's first female minister with portfolio, Sheikha Aisha bint Khalfan bin Jamil al-Saibia. She was appointed to the post of National Authority for Industrial Craftsmanship, an office that attempts to preserve and promote Oman's traditional crafts and stimulate industry. Despite these changes, there was little change to the actual political makeup of the government. The Sultan continued to rule by decree. Nearly 100 suspected Islamists were arrested in 2005 and 31 people were convicted of trying to overthrow the government. They were ultimately pardoned in June of the same year. Inspired by the Arab Spring uprisings taking place throughout the region, protests also occurred in Oman during the early months of 2011. Although they did not call for the ousting of the regime, demonstrators demanded political reforms, improved living conditions, and the creation of more jobs. They were dispersed by riot police in February 2011. Sultan Qaboos reacted by promising jobs and benefits. In October 2011, elections were held to the Consultative Assembly, for which Sultan Qaboos promised greater powers. The following year, the government began a crackdown on internet criticism. In September 2012, trials began of activists accused of posting abusive and provocative criticism of the government online. 6 were given jail terms of 12 to 18 months and fines of around $2,500 each. Geography. Oman lies between latitudes 16 degrees and 28 degrees north, and longitudes 52 degrees and 60 degrees east. A vast gravel desert plain covers most of central Oman, with mountain ranges along the north and southeast coast, where the country's main cities are also located. The capital city Muscat, Sohar and Sur in the north, and Salalah in the south. Oman's climate is hot and dry in the interior and humid along the coast. During past epochs, Oman was covered by ocean, witnessed by the large numbers of fossilized shells existing in areas of the desert away from the modern coastline. The peninsula of Musandam exclave, which has a strategic location on the Strait of Hormuz, is separated from the rest of Oman by the United Arab Emirates. The series of small towns known collectively as Dibba are the gateway to the Musandam Peninsula on land and the fishing villages of Musandam by sea, with boats available for hire at Qarsib for trips into the Musandam Peninsula by sea. Oman's other exclave, inside UAE territory, known as Madha, located halfway between the Musandam Peninsula and the main body of Oman, is part of the Musandam Governorate, covering approximately 75 square kilometers. Madha's boundary was settled in 1969, with the northeast corner of Madha barely 10 meters from the Fujairah Road. Within the Madha exclave is a UAE enclave called Nawar, belonging to the Emirate of Sharjah, situated about 8 kilometers along a dirt track west of the town of New Madha, consisting of about 40 houses with a clinic and telephone exchange. The central desert of Oman is an important source of meteorites for scientific analysis. Climate. Like the rest of the Persian Gulf, Oman generally has one of the hottest climates in the world, and receives little rainfall. Annual rainfall in Muscat averages 100 millimeters, falling mostly in January. The Dhofar Mountains area has a tropical-like climate and receives seasonal rainfall as a result of the monsoon winds from the Indian Ocean, saturated with cool moisture and heavy fog. The mountain areas receive more rainfall, and annual rainfall on the higher parts of the Jabal Akhdar probably exceeds 400 millimeters. Low temperatures in the mountainous areas result in snow cover once every few years. Some parts of the coast, particularly near the island of Masara, sometimes receive no rain at all within the course of a year. The climate generally is very hot, with temperatures reaching around 50 degrees Celsius in the hot season, from May to September. Flora and fauna. Desert shrub and desert grass, common to southern Arabia, are found in Oman, but vegetation is sparse in the interior plateau, which is largely gravel desert. The greater monsoon rainfall in Dhofar and the mountains makes the growth there more luxuriant during summer. Coconut palms grow plentifully in the coastal plains of Dhofar, and frankincense is produced in the hills, with abundant oleander and varieties of acacia. The Al-Hajjar Mountains are a distinct ecoregion, the highest points in eastern Arabia, with wildlife including the Arabian tahr. Indigenous mammals include the leopard, hyena, fox, wolf, hare, oryx, and ibex. Birds include the vulture, eagle, stork, bustard, Arabian partridge, bee-eater, falcon, and sunbird. In 2001, Oman had 9 endangered species of mammals, 5 endangered types of birds, and 19 threatened plant species. Decrees have been passed to protect endangered species, including the Arabian leopard, Arabian oryx, mountain gazelle, goiter gazelle, Arabian tar, green sea turtle, hawksbill turtle, and olive ridley turtle. However, the Oman Arabian Oryx Sanctuary is the first site ever to be deleted from UNESCO's World Heritage List, due to the government's decision to reduce the site to 10% of its former size so that the remainder could be open to oil prospectors. Environmental issues, drought and limited rainfall contribute to shortages in the nation's water supply, so maintaining an adequate supply of water for agricultural and domestic use is one of Oman's most pressing environmental problems. With limited renewable water resources, 94% of available water is used in farming and 2% for industrial activity, with the majority sourced from fossil water in the desert areas and spring water in hills and mountains. Drinking water is available throughout Oman, either piped or delivered. The soil in coastal plains, such as Salalah, have shown increased levels of salinity, due to overexploitation of groundwater and encroachment by seawater in the water table. Pollution of beaches and other coastal areas by oil tanker traffic through the Strait of Hormuz and Gulf of Oman is also a persistent risk. Local and national entities have noted unethical treatment of animals in Oman. In particular, stray dogs are often the victims of torture, abuse or neglect. Currently, the only approved method of decreasing the stray dog population is shooting by police officers. Because of Islamic misgivings towards dogs, they are often stoned or beaten to death by neighborhood teens or adults. The Oman government has refused to implement a spay and neuter program or create any animal shelters in the country. Cats, while seen as more acceptable than dogs, are viewed as pests and frequently die of starvation or illness.